Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're stepping into the shoes of international historians to trace the truly cinematic journey and the lasting global legacy of Mahatma Gandhi. We're going to peel back the myth, look directly at the historical records, and figure out exactly how one incredibly complex individual managed to shape the entire course of the 20th century. So let's just dive right into it with a core question that separates historical reality from the legend. When we hear the name Mahatma, which literally translates to great soul, we kind of just picture this flawless, saintly figure, right? But as historians, we know realities are rarely that simple. To truly understand his monumental impact on global civil rights, we have to look at the evolving and honestly, sometimes contradictory man behind the title. We need to examine his deep human flaws, his early prejudices, and those profound personal transformations. Here is our roadmap for today. Number 1, the making of a leader. Number 2, South Africa, evolving racial views. Number 3, from lawyer to nationalist. Number 4, core philosophies, study guide. Number 5, the fight for unity. And finally, number 6, assassination and global legacy. Okay, part 1, the making of a leader, the crucible. Just looking at his grand trajectory, it's absolutely incredible how much he evolved over his lifetime. I mean, we start with a young man studying law in London back in 1888, finding his political footing in South Africa in 1893, returning home to India as a seasoned activist in 1915, and then literally shaking the foundations of the British Empire by 1930. Picture this. It's London, 1888. A young, incredibly shy man is shivering in the English weather, taking his very first hesitant steps toward organizing, and he does it through a vegetarian committee. Gandhi was so timid during his law studies that he was actually psychologically unable to cross-examine witnesses. But he had made a strict vow to his mother to avoid meat, and because of that, he found a community in the London Vegetarian Society. He got elected to its executive committee, helped establish a local chapter, and honestly, this seemingly minor extracurricular activity was his first real taste of organizing. It was his training ground. It's where he learned committee work and, eventually, how to overcome that crippling stage fright. Moving on to part 2, South Africa, evolving racial views. Now, this is a crucial part of his life to evaluate impartially. There is a stark contrast between his initial colonial elitism and his later recognition of Native African rights. When Gandhi first arrived in South Africa in 1893, he actually considered himself a Briton first. The historical records show that at age 24, he was preparing legal briefs arguing that Indians and Anglo-Saxons shared Aryan stock, and he complained about Indians being grouped with Black Africans. He very much held the prejudices of his time and class. But as he continuously faced brutal racial discrimination himself, literally being thrown off trains and kicked into gutters, his entire worldview started to shift. By 1906, during the Bambata Rebellion, he was leading a volunteer mixed unit of Indian and African stretcher bearers. And by 1910, he was openly writing that Africans were the original inhabitants of the land and that their territory had been forcibly occupied. Tracking this evolution is just absolutely vital to understanding how his mindset developed. Let's jump to part 3. From lawyer to nationalist. So Winston Churchill delivered this widely reported, incredibly sneering speech in 1931. He was infuriated that Gandhi was negotiating on equal terms with the representative of the King Emperor. But you know what? This quote perfectly visualizes Gandhi's dramatic identity shift from a British-suited colonial lawyer to a community ascetic in a hand-spun loincloth. And it brilliantly illustrates exactly what Gandhi wanted to achieve. By ditching his Western suit and adopting the short dhoti woven with hand-spun yarn, Gandhi was visually and physically identifying himself with India's rural poor. He wasn't just changing his clothes, he was completely rewriting the visual language of Indian nationalism, making it accessible not just to the educated elite, but to the everyday masses. Next up, part 4, core philosophies, study guide. Let's pause the timeline for a quick student-friendly study guide to unpack his political curriculum. First up, Satyagraha, meaning truth or soul force, formulated around 1906 to protest biometric registration laws. The crucial point here is that Satyagraha isn't passive, not at all. It's a brave muscle of soul force meant to actively conquer hate with love. It requires the endurance of suffering as a means to an end, completely refusing brute force. Instead, it aims to morally exhaust and ultimately transform the oppressor. It's a highly active, disciplined form of resistance. Then we have ahimsa, or nonviolence. As an objective historian, it is fascinating to see how he practically weaponized an ancient religious concept into a tool for national liberation. Ahimsa has deep roots in Hindu, Jain, and Buddhist thought, meaning to do no harm to any living being. But Gandhi's absolute genius was taking this deeply personal vow and turning it into a mass political strategy. Though he made one very specific distinction. While he considered nonviolence infinitely superior to violence, he explicitly stated he preferred violence over cowardice. And the third concept is brahmacharya, which means asceticism and abstinence. In 1906, Gandhi took a vow of brahmacharya, completely abstaining from sexual relations and heavily restricting his diet, eventually even giving up cow's milk. These intense personal ascetic practices deeply defined his public image. For Gandhi, personal purity and public political power were totally intertwined. He believed that to conquer the oppressor on the outside, he first had to conquer his own internal passions. So how did these philosophies fuel his major campaigns on the ground? Well, when he transitioned to leading the Indian National Congress, he started small. He organized peasants in Champaran and farmers in Kedah. From there, he escalated to massive national movements, like the 1930 Salt March, where he literally walked 241 miles to manually collect salt just to defy British monopoly laws. And then finally, in 1942, he launched the Quit India movement, demanding immediate independence and telling his followers they must do or die. If you want to understand his complex strategy, think of it kind of like a giant mirror. He had a three-step political engine. Step 1, unite the masses, which he did by building consensus among diverse groups, like supporting the Khilafat movement for Hindu-Muslim cooperation. Step 2, economically and politically freeze the system by refusing cooperation with British institutions. And Step 3, endure suffering without striking back. When the whole world saw unarmed Indians taking beatings from colonial police, the moral authority of the British Empire simply collapsed. They were forced to look in the mirror. Which brings us to part 5, the fight for unity. Imagine this. It's August 1947. The rest of the country, including leaders like Jawaharlal Nehru, are in New Delhi celebrating independence. But Gandhi? He's deeply grieving. The British had agreed to partition the subcontinent into a Hindu-majority India and a Muslim-majority Pakistan, sparking one of the largest and most violent migrations in human history. Over 500,000 people were killed in sectarian riots. So Gandhi completely isolated himself in Calcutta. He refused to celebrate, instead spinning cloth and using his own body via fasting to beg for religious unity. And his immense moral weight actually successfully stopped local communal violence there. And finally, part 6, assassination and global legacy. Impartially reporting the facts, it is a tragic reality that his unwavering efforts to build consensus across religious lines ultimately cost him his life. On January 30th, 1948, on his way to an interfaith prayer meeting, Gandhi was shot 3 times. His assassin, Nathuram Godse, was a militant Hindu nationalist. Godse and his co-conspirators were furious over Gandhi's insistence on protecting Muslim minorities and his recent successful fast that forced the Indian government to release financial assets to the newly formed state of Pakistan. Gandhi's desperate fight for inclusive unity made him a target of radical nationalism. But assessing his legacy today, we see that his methods absolutely did not die with him in 1948. They were exported globally, providing a direct blueprint for modern civil rights struggles. Satyagraha became the strategic foundation for the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa, the exact place he first tested it. And in the United States, Martin Luther King Jr. explicitly adopted Gandhi's concept of soul force, using those very same principles of nonviolent civil disobedience to dismantle systemic racial segregation. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a thought. How does understanding this incredibly complex evolution shape our view of civil rights today? The Mahatma wasn't born a saint. He was forged through real failures, early biases, and an unrelenting pursuit of truth. By looking at the objective historical reality, we see that you don't have to be flawless to change the world. You just have to be willing to evolve, to endure for your beliefs, and to actively conquer hate with love. Thanks for joining me on this journey, and keep questioning the narratives that shape our world.